Welcome to the See Me Be Me podcast. I'm Nile Henry.
And I'm Blair Henry.
And we're two brothers who set out on a mission to make motorsport and STEM careers more diverse, affordable, and inclusive. We are the founders of the Blair Project.
This podcast series delves into the minds of inspirational individuals who come from ordinary and often humble backgrounds, but through their belief, dogged determination, and never give up attitude, have managed to overcome academic, social, or mental challenges to achieve their dream careers.
Our guests will share their life lessons that you too can apply to your own. We hope their stories will inspire you to go further, aim higher, and accept nothing less than you deserve. Your ambition, your purpose is all within, and we're here to help you unlock it. The planet of possibilities are endless.
You know who made it.
So on today's episode, we are joined by Lee Chambers, who has founded an inclusive wellbeing business known as Essentialise. Today, we'll be discussing Lee's own journey as an entrepreneur, as well as his challenges and successes throughout his career. Lee has had a diverse career working in areas such as finance, elite sports, local government, as well as building a European video game business. Today, he runs Essentialise, a well-being and coaching company with the ambition of positively impacting the health and happiness of 1 million individuals.
So, what are we waiting for? Let's dive straight in to today's episode. Lee, welcome to the See Me Be Me podcast.
That's great to be with you guys.
So, Lee, for the listeners viewing this episode, tell us a bit about yourself, what you do, and how did you set up Essentialise?
Yeah, so if I'm to just quickly run through, born and brought up in Bolton in the Northwest. First one in my family to uni, dropped out, went back again, set up a tech business, grew that, went on a journey despite a lot of doubt and a lot of people thinking that I wouldn't be able to make it. Then I got ill, had to learn to walk again, then decided actually I need to take a step back, find out what's important. And then when my kids started school, I was like, I need to go and change the world, do something different. So I decided to use my academic background in psychology to set up a wellbeing business that now ultimately focuses on inclusive, accessible, and effective wellbeing for organizations. And yeah, been doing that for 2.5 years, been a journey, like it always is. But you know what? When you set up something new, you're passionate about it, you make a difference, you create an impact. Every day you get up, you're ready to go and seize the day.
And so take us back to your childhood. You know, you said you were brought up in Bolton. Yeah. Do you know when you were a kid, did you ever dream of like setting up and running your own business? Or yeah, what did 8-year-old Lee Chambers want to be?
Yeah, so I suppose it was interesting, you know, in growing up in the North and starting life on a council estate, you don't have the biggest aspirations, but I've always been a little bit, you know, different, a bit non-conformist. I have like most people do, I have a crazy uncle, and that crazy uncle was like deep into computers in the late 80s and early 90s, and he just got me a Commodore 64, and as I was tapping away on that, waiting half an hour for the tape to load up, I was just like, actually, maybe one day I'll do something with computers, with tech. Like, this is new stuff. Like, I can do this, but my parents have no idea. So I'd always started to think, I'll probably do something technically. I was decent at school. When I applied myself, I was pretty good. I didn't apply myself as much as I could have, probably not. But I think a lot of people can say that. But yeah, I suppose as well, I was always quite entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
Really, big thing for me was my dad worked like 12-hour shifts, grafting as like a manual engineer. There was a point where my mum was working 3 jobs, you know, because they wanted social mobility for me and my younger brothers. And, you know, my parents grafted. That's given me a work ethic as well and seeing how valuable that is. But also, I remember thinking when I was like 8, 9, like, parents are like never here. And it's because they're trying to create a better future for us. But I thought, you know, when I've got kids, I don't want to be kind of stuck in a factory for 12 hours, not being able to see my kids and just working just to pay stuff. I thought if I can build something myself, I can have that control. I can shape my life. And you know what? I was that kid who was like buying multi-pack cans, rolling up to secondary school with a cool box and selling them for £1 each. And at one point, actually, you know, the teachers stopped us doing it. The teachers like clamped down because apparently it was health and safety, and we were carrying around like foodstuffs and drinks.
Yeah.
And I think it got to a point where, you know, I'm there with like 2 cool boxes with wheels on, a PE kit on my back. You know, like guy forgets his books for English, but he's got all this stuff with him. Like, not setting the best example. So I've always had a little bit of that spirit. I'm gonna make something of my own, and always been a little bit like I want to build something that I can control. So I'm not, you know, like my own parents working every hour God sends, and then don't see my kids.
It sounds similar to us because myself and Niall, we used to always sell cans and sweets, chocolates, just to earn a bit of money on the side and whatnot. So that's you could almost say that was the start of our entrepreneurial journey as well. But just to going on what you said, Lee, about you know, your dad was working. Was it you said 12-hour shifts and your mum was working 3 part-time jobs?
Yeah.
So I was would you say that they were the most like influential people in your life growing up, and in terms of inspiring you to where you are now?
So I'd definitely say like my parents instilled a work ethic in me.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time with like my grandma and granddad, and they're, you know, Windrush generation, you know, came over to the UK. My granddad grafted. He used to work in the steelworks on the railways, and he was the one lifting things that other people couldn't lift. Man, you see the size of his hands. But yeah, ultimately, you know, my granddad just kind of instilled with me like being a good human, like, you know, be respectful, show up, turn up, and yeah, make things happen, take action. So I got a lot of like influence through my family. And the truth is, you know, when you grow up on the estate, there's a hell of a lot of different influences. Some positive, some not so positive, but you got to see how people went off on different paths and what happened if you carried on with them. You even saw really good people in difficult situations make choices that, you know, in reflection weren't good choices for them, and ended up, you know, in really difficult places sometimes because they didn't have any choices. So I was always grateful for the choices that I had. But then when I got to university and I was looking out at like trying to find who I was, and you start to look at externally for role models. You know, I'm kind of like part entrepreneur, part scientist, part philosopher. And I looked out for like, you know, can I see a black individual who's walked on that path? And it's like football, acting, rapping. Couldn't see anyone like me. It was proper. I mean, to be honest, it caused me a lot of pain, a lot of stress, because I was like, can I actually be it? Because I can't see it. And I'm struggling to kind of know and work out who I am. And you need to be able to, you know, see something external to just validate that you can go on that pathway. And you know what? That's what kind of drives me now to be quite vocal about these things, because it wasn't long after that I went out to seek a mentor, went and spoke to someone who's run 2 successful businesses in Manchester. This was like 15 years ago. But, you know, 50-year-old white guy, you know, he's made successful. But I go and ask him to be my mentor, and he's like, this ain't going to work for you, Lee. You're young, you're black, you got a bit of an attitude, you ain't got no investment behind you, you ain't got no network. Like, go out and smooth those rough edges and, you know, get mingling and actually build a network and get yourself visible. And to be honest, like, you're going to take people's advice, right, when you can't see any other way. But that doubt has fueled my journey ever since, really, because I don't like to be doubted. I'm going to go and prove what you can do, not what you can't.
And I was just wondering as well, did you have, going into education, did you have any sort of like influences or even like a role model going through like school, college or university, anything like that? Or has it always been almost like outside of that area where you found the most influence, would you say?
What I would say is I've had a few people around me, a few teachers who like believed in me. I had a head teacher who at primary school who kind of saw the talent that I had if I applied myself. And she kind of, you know, made sure that I was kept on the right tracks when I started to fall off. And I think like many of us, you know, we had just a few teachers who were like external adults who just kind of believed in us. Also had teachers who doubted me and thought I wouldn't account to nothing. But it's really powerful how you've got those who are, you know, able to actually back you when you're
Yeah,
young and
yeah,
you're not necessarily going to back yourself. And you're looking, you know, as much as I think that, you know, adults are just children anyway, children are always looking for that influence, someone who's got a bit more privilege and power at that time as an adult to just back them. You know, they don't need to do a lot. It just needs to be those positive words of reinforcement and just a little bit of that guidance when you see kids just falling off the wayside. The truth is, we live in a world where, you know, if you're a black kid, you're more likely to be adultified, you're more likely to be stereotyped as trouble, and not given
absolutely.
that little bit of support to get you back on. So I'm passionate about that, but I'm also very grateful for those teachers who kind of guided me, because education, like for many people, has become something that's created opportunity. And there's real value in that, even in this world today where the education system's got a whole load of issues. But what it can do is it can provide opportunity if it's accessible and if you've got people within that who, you know, keep you on the pathway.
Yeah,
No, absolutely, absolutely. And Lee, I just want to take it back to something that you said before, or what you said earlier before, is that obviously, you know, at 8 years old, or it might have been earlier, your uncle gave you your first Commodore gaming system, which you know, I've seen, and I've played on a Commodore before, even though I'm a young guy myself. Like, yeah, I played on a Commodore, and then, you know, you had that experience of being an entrepreneur at school, selling sweets and drinks. And then you went to university, and I believe you studied accounting,
So
because then you
international business.
you studied international business,
Yeah.
and then you became you worked in the corporate finance world,
Hmm.
and then you left to then set up your own business and become an entrepreneur again. With you had a video game business for
Yep.
I believe about 11 years.
Yeah.
Can you
So
tell the viewers or the listeners about, you know, that business, and what made you want to drop out of that corporate finance world?
So what actually got me dropping out now was the recession. So my grad scheme got pulled and I was made redundant. So actually, it wasn't by choice, it was by circumstance. And, you know, I'd spent like 11 months at a national bank, grinding away on the grad scheme as you do, you know, proving your worth, doing all the tasks that no one else wants to do. Because, you know, you've got to show you're resilient and you're worth investing in. But when the credit crunch came along, all those people who were like imparting knowledge were packing the desks up. And you know, for us, there's 16 of us on the grad scheme. We thought we'd be all right because they don't pay grad scheme people much at all. Like barely pay you anything. But no, and ended up, you know, being made redundant and having to move back home. And the worst bit is my parents are sold up because they didn't think I was coming back. They thought I got a profession now. They took me off to buy me first suit and stuff like that because, you know, he's made it. Off he's going to be, you know, working in corp finance. He's going to make it big. But no, get spat out, end up back home. And what I actually did at that point is, you know, I come from a relatively deprived background. I had to just go and earn some money. So I got a job at Bolton Council, working in service development. And holy, I mean, I'm not the type of character who's gonna really tolerate local government for too long. I'm too outspoken, I'm too innovative, and I'm too like, but what, you've done it for 30 years like that? What, that doesn't matter. Let's change it. Got things to do. This needs to be more effective. But after 5 months, I actually used those wages as kind of just a seed to the start of the business. And it started out very simple, kind of reseller e-commerce. But it was just very much at the start of that digital adoption of purchasing. And the business just took off incredibly quickly. And all of a sudden, you're in a place where, you know, literally that started out of that back bedroom of my parents' house. And after a year, my parents' driveway was destroyed by the amount of incoming and outgoing deliveries. Then you get a unit. Hell, I've even made enough money to buy my own home. Like, this was in my early 20s. It was like I went from having like nothing to having quite a lot really quickly. But like I've said before, as that grew and as my responsibility grew, so did the stress. Running a business in your 20s when you've not got a lot of life experience is tough. You're hiring people who are older than you, probably wiser as well. But like, you gradually start to realize that every decision that you make has an impact on the livelihoods of others.
Yeah.
That was stressful. But also in an industry which is so agile and fast moving, you could never stop and reflect. You were constantly thinking, right, what's the next innovation? What's the next cycle? How can we grow? We kind of moved into software and started to consider how we build stuff around risk-based pricing. That was a project that went really well. We also then moved into a project around kind of membership boxes around merchandise, which took off really quickly and then very much fizzled out as one of our competitors with a much bigger budget, got a whole range of licenses and limited what we could do. And yeah, I've still got slightly bitter feelings towards that company today, but it's business, But the biggest thing for me was 5 years in, we started to operate across Europe. It felt great on one hand to have proven those doubters wrong, but that very success started to chase me down the hill because I still didn't feel that much of a success, if I'm honest. It's difficult when you're in it to realize what you've built and what you've done. But then when I became ill, I mean, holy crap, I had to stop. And then I had a lot of time to reflect. And that was a real turning point in my journey.
And talk us through that period. So you were running a quite successful business, and was that in the 11th year, or was that a little bit before that where you fell ill?
That was during year 5.
It was year 5, right? Okay.
So basically, I'm working one Friday, and my wrist starts to swell up, and I'm like, have I banged it? Or have I just been, working too hard on the keyboard this week?
Yeah.
I thought, if it stays like this, I'll go and get it checked out. But then on the Sunday, my knee started to swell up, locked in place. Basically, my body started attacking itself. And by the following week, I was in hospital, like pretty much immobile. My immune system attacking my body, and felt like I was on fire. It was absolute agony. And it just came out of the blue from nowhere. A week before that, I'd been playing 5-a-side, doing whatever I wanted, to suddenly end up in hospital bed, couldn't feed myself properly. I had nurses taking me to go and sit down in the shower. Couldn't go to the toilet on my own. I'd lost my independence, my physicality, my mobility in like less than a week. And it just makes you stop. Well, firstly, I had to delegate everything that I could. I still kind of sat there with my one hand, like trying to use voice activation to send messages. But it just wiped me out. And it was really difficult because at that point, my son was 18 months old and he weren't speaking, but he was coming to visit me at the hospital and like looking at me with his massive eyes like, Daddy, why can't you play? And my wife was pregnant with, 6 months in with my daughter. And I'd actually started to plan stepping away from the business a bit, stepping away from operations and becoming more strategic because I needed to be there. All of a sudden, everyone needed to be there for me. And it was tough to have that feeling. But what that meant is for a month, I was in a hospital bed getting tested for everything under the sun, trying to work out why. And they couldn't actually find out exactly why my immune system had decided to go nuts. But what they did come to a conclusion is no matter what started it, the treatment's the same. We give you medication that stops your immune system. We drain all the fluid off your joints. And you go and learn to walk again and see how it goes. So that's a journey that I went on, like an 11-month rehab, intensive physio. My daughter's born in that period. So I'm determined to get back on my feet before my daughter starts walking. And I managed that. And incredibly proud. I had some issues with my back, had some issues with how I was walking. But ultimately, it just shows what you'll go through, what your mindset needs to be to recover, and just how much you'll do for other people. Because I probably wouldn't have done that if I was on my own.
And I guess, Lee, just wanted to touch on that with your illness and whatnot. So what helped you get through that tough and challenging period, would you say?
I'd say the biggest thing, Blair, was firstly having my daughter. So when my daughter was born, I was in like intensive physio, doing hydrotherapy in the pool, trying to stand on my feet and take steps again. And I kind of, when she was born, I was there holding her, and I thought I have a responsibility to get back on my feet and get back well again, so I can play with my kids. And I wanted to get back on my feet so I could walk with my daughter when she started. And it's a real powerful driver. What I also kind of realized is that after the initial feelings of, why me, why now, like, this ain't fair. I looked after myself. I've never been ill before. And then like something like this happens and I'm wiped out. I realized actually I couldn't change it. I couldn't change what had happened. But what I could do is influence and control the outcomes. So what I realized is that actually I needed to be grateful for what I did have. Because I was sat there in hospital one day and it just occurred to me, you know what? You're getting free healthcare. You've got free education. You've never been hungry. You've never been homeless. You live in the first world, like you've been able to set up a business. Some people in some countries, you can't, you simply can't do that. I'd managed to be in a financial position where I wasn't worried about going on stat sick pay and not being able to pay my mortgage, stuff like that. I just realized, damn, Lee, like you need to be grateful. You need to really, appreciate the situation that you're in. And that also gave me a platform. So when I went into walk-in rehab, right, there were 9 of us, people who had strokes, spinal injuries, lower limb injuries, me. What I noticed, right, is that 3 of us had come to a place of acceptance that this is pretty, SHIT situation to be in, but we're just going to do what we can and take ownership and accountability over our recovery. 3 of us. Interestingly, that same 3 of us had our heads up, like asking, the physiotherapist, what can we do? What else can we do? What do I need to make sure I do? Why am I doing this? Who were the first 3 out of walk-in rehab into intensive physio? Because the 3 of us who got into a place where we'd accepted what had happened, and we didn't sit there wishing it didn't happen. We didn't sit there thinking, 6 months ago I used to be doing this. We were just laser focused on let's get into the best position that we can. And I think that's a lesson for anyone going through adversity. Look and think about how you can take ownership over things. Focus on those things that you can control, things that you can influence. Don't spend any energy wishing things were different. Don't spend any energy on the things you can't control. And I'm still on my feet today, so I feel blessed. But it's like you'll do more for other people than you do for yourself. And if you take ownership and accountability over the things you can control, you will get outcomes. We might, I'm 70% physically where I was. That's as good as it's getting, but that's so much better than like being 10% where I was at that point.
That's brilliant. Honestly, I found that story just really inspiringly. And how long was the recovery process, and like, how many years have you been able to walk again since going through the recovery?
Yeah, so that happened just as I turned 29 in June 2014. So now we're June, 2023, 9 years later. So the recovery process, I could walk a mile unaided after 11 months. So it was like a whole year of recovery. Since then, I've been on medication to, suppress my immune system. Managed to come off that in 2019 by just optimizing my sleep, what I eat, how much I move. After years of tracking stuff, just became a massive experiment and a massive project. And that's given me the energy to really push on with this new business as well. But ultimately, during that period as well, I went and did my master's, stayed at home with my kids, and just stepped out of my business. And comically, when you step out of your own business, you realize how much you're in the way. And also you realize, just how much you can be a blocker and how other people are actually more competent than you think, and actually probably better than you at lots of things too. But no, I enjoyed that time with my kids, and that made me different as well. Spending time with your kids makes you more present, more patient, better communicator. And hell, I'm much better at negotiating now. Like having 2 kids up against you, double teaming you in negotiations, you've got to get sharp, man. You definitely honed my skills. But yeah, I think ultimately, that period of recovery, it really got me to reflect, made me a lot more grateful, made me appreciate life, but also has made me grow through that adversity. Because I said, like, I'm 70% physically. It's not getting better than that because I'm a bit damaged and a bit limited, right? But I'm 200% mentally through going through that and growing and using that trauma to grow, man. And we can all use adversity because adversity don't discriminate, but the adversity that you go through is so often what makes you not only passionate and fueled to make change, but also, a more refined person out the other side.
Yeah. Now, Lee, you know what? Like Blair said earlier, truly, truly inspiring. And I can imagine a lot of the audience just thinking like, wow, how does he do it? And talk me through, where did you develop that mindset from, that you just like, whatever adversity, I'm going to go out and try and defy the odds. And, like you said, a lot of people who would have been in that position if they were immobilized and couldn't walk again, I think you said there was 9 people, the other 6 said I'd pretty much just given up in their head mentally. And, yourself and 2 others had it in that, we're going to get ourselves better and come back stronger. Where does your mindset come from?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, Niall. I think that the first part of that is going through prior adversity. I think that, I dropped out of university because my mental health ended up in a shocking place. And I had to go home and spend a year getting my head straight. And I suppose in getting my head straight, I developed a set of skills and a bunch of, a bit of a toolkit for being able to mentally handle challenging situations. That allowed me to go back to university and graduate once I'd re-enrolled. But also what I realized is that year spent, building that toolkit and working on myself and building my own, kind of self-ability to navigate situations meant that when I got made redundant, because that was tough, but I was able to kind of turn that round pretty quickly. When bad things happen, you have got to go like, you've got to have that period where you feel like it's crap, because it is. If you're so naive, you're like, oh no, it's absolutely fine, then that's a problem as well. You can't ignore when things go badly because there's something to be learned from every time something goes wrong, right? But I think it's born from the fact that I had to be quite adaptable and resilient when I was younger. Reflecting back, I've only got a diagnosis of autism in the past 2 years, but being autistic is something I've obviously been since I was born. And I think that also plays a bit of a role, just seeing the world differently and having lots of challenges and never really conforming has meant that I've always been one to question and challenge. And I think that plays part in it as well, where it become, instead of like worrying and being, sorry for myself, I was like, what can I do? I also think, you go through that prior adversity, it gives you the skills. It also gives you the belief that you can go through a bad time and you can get back up again and keep going. And just being born, into a place where that was quite deprived, you saw how people's attitudes change their pathway. And you could see, actually, even from the most, from the most poor, the poorest, the most deprived background, you could go and achieve great things. But you had to really graft, really apply yourself, and really take hold of the options and opportunities you had in front of you, because the opportunities are less if you start with less exposure to them, but the opportunities are still there. And if you can exploit those few opportunities that you have and execute on them, you'll probably get more opportunities in the future. And one of those opportunities might just be your pathway to something better. So for me, it's part of growing up in a relatively, lesser privileged position and seeing that play out. It's going through stuff and learning how to handle that. And it's also probably a bit of me just thinking differently about challenges. Like, I look back now and a lot of people say, oh, it happened to me. It's so bad. I'm like, it happened for me. It woke me up. It got me to think differently. It got me to challenge. It challenged me, man. It wasn't a threat. It was a challenge. And I had to step up, literally, back onto my feet again. So, yeah, I think it's fostered over time, Niall. And if you don't stop, you don't learn. So pause moments where you just get a chance to figure out. And I think that was a big-ass pause moment for me. But I took some of the tools I'd learned on the journey and applied them in that situation.
And speaking of opportunities, so even though you went through that challenging period, you came back on your feet and you ended up selling your video game business. And then in March, was it March of 2020? You then founded another business which became Essentialise. And that mainly focuses on health and well-being. And did that idea for your business come as a result of the difficulties that you had during that period, that dark period, and you were like, you want to coach people and help them with their health? Or yeah, talk me through that.
Yeah, so the origin for the business was firstly that personal journey, and kind of realizing, I'd managed to empower myself. How can we help other people do that? Because I used to think, if I was an employee at that point, I got ill, I'd have got stat sick pay. That wouldn't have, kept my family going, and I'd have needed that stat sick pay for quite a while. And how would have that impacted me financially? So I wanted, to think, how can I help employees to empower their health so that doesn't happen? And if it does happen, they can go through the same process as me to get themselves back well enough to get back to work. Secondly, when you run a business, especially when you run a business in tech, you see the impact of people not being well. Like, I saw the economic cost to my own business when people were struggling. And I thought, there's a real clear business case here. If we're able to support people on their health journey, then they don't end up, off on the sick. They don't end up leaving because, they're not able to work effectively, and the performance increases. So I was like, there's a clear business case here. The link between well-being and performance is really clear. It's only become more clear over the past few years as companies have really dialed into it, and we've got more and more data to show that. I think the other thing as well was I was looking at what businesses were doing. I went out to the States and researched to find out what companies were doing in the space. And I just thought, people are doing things just for the sake of doing them and have no idea what the impact is. Like fruit bowls and bean bags and slides. I mean, it's all good, right? And then COVID hit and it's like, yeah, no one's on the slide, man, because no one's in the office. And that fruit's going moldy in the corner. And yeah, bean bags, COVID risk, because the fabric never gets washed. But no, jokes aside, I just kind of saw there wasn't anyone delivering like effective data-driven well-being. There was a massive market opportunity there, but we needed to change the opinion of the market, which is a challenge in itself because it's easy to jump in with quick solutions. It's harder to do it properly. Saw the own challenges that I had and the business acumen and some of the industries that I'd worked in as well, and just seeing the challenges that they had as well. So as far as I could see, there was something there. But also the biggest thing that stuck out to me is of all the services that there were, everything was white. Everything in the wellbeing space is white and generally pretty middle class. So I was like, where's the wellbeing going to be for people like me? Yeah. And especially as a man in the space. Ain't many men in the space either. And I thought, you know what? I need to be that role model. Like, I want kids. I want that little black lad at school to think, you know what? I can go and do psychology and help people get well. And, whether I'm a doctor or whether I'm a coach or whether I'm running my own business and doing training and strategy across the world. Like, I wanted young kids who are like me to see something that they could potentially be. So I thought, what am I going to do? I'm going to actually put myself out there. I'm going to build something that, sets an example. And I'm just going to I'm going to enjoy the journey. And that was the biggest thing. Yeah. And, just the same as you guys, you enjoy what you do because you are breaking through those boundaries. You are setting an example and you're taking the next generation with you.
And Lee, just wanted to ask, since setting up Essentialise, a running and inclusive wellbeing business, what makes you passionate about what you do?
To be honest, Blair, I think for me, I wake up in the morning, I know I'm making an impact. Yeah. I get to collaborate with great people. I get to work with businesses and see the difference that we can make. I get to see and I get messages from young people saying, I'm inspired by what you're doing. It's different. Like, keep doing it. We've won a few awards. And again, those awards, I ain't bothered about the glass trophy off, trophystore.com. But I am thinking that some judges somewhere have looked at what we do and are thinking, yeah, we're gonna recognize that and tell them to keep doing what they're doing because it's making a difference. But ultimately, for me, fundamentally, it's about love. I love what I do, love the people I do it with, I love the impact that I can make. And I get up in the morning and I'm ready to go. And I know there's so many people out there who go to bed on a Sunday night thinking, man, I got to go to work on a Monday.
Yeah.
And it's just being able to actually be part of changing that, not only how I feel, but how other people feel when they go into the workplace. Because, you know, when you're from a marginalized group, there are enough challenges out in society anyway. There's enough inequity that exists. So we've got to create spaces where people can feel safe, where people can execute good work. And for me, you know, I'm just passionate about what I do. I think that comes through. People then vibe off that and resonate with that. But also, I'm not scared to challenge, and I will push back against things, and I will call people out. And you need to be passionate of energy, because you're pushing back against systems and structures that have existed for hundreds of years. But you know what? I ain't going quietly, and I'm going to enjoy every minute of it.
We always say, it's when you're doing something you love, it doesn't feel like work. It just feels like, you're doing something you enjoy, and it just you don't have that same feeling as someone maybe who's working a standard, let's say 9 to 5, and it's Monday now, you've got to get up and go to work. It's just something you're passionate about, and you don't feel any like negative feelings about having to do it, really. So it's very similar to our experience with the Blair Project. I wanted to also ask Lee, what would you say is the most important lesson you've learned during your entrepreneurial journey?
What I will say, just to add to that last point, Blair, is that while it's easy to look at employees and think, they don't want to go in on a Monday morning, entrepreneurship, not glamorous. Man, it's graft. You know, there's always things going wrong. It's not what you see on Instagram. You know, I ain't popping no champagne corks and driving no Lambos. I'm just making stuff happen, man. It's not what you imagine it is. People aren't sharing the 12-hour shift that they do at the desk to make stuff happen when you've got a new project comes in and you've got to, you get your information out there. It's like, so there's a realism to it. I make it sound sometimes like I'm out there on the battlefield, on the front lines, like fighting a good fight. There are sometimes I'm sat in the tent, like drawing up some plans. It's a fine balance, and I think that it's not as glamorous as people imagine that it actually is. But I think the biggest lesson on my journey is that, firstly, to understand where you bring value, and when you start out, you're going to be doing everything. Unless you've got some big ass funding from one of Daddy's friends. But for most Black entrepreneurs, we're working with the buttons we've got. You look at the funding figures; it says it all, man. If you're a certain type of person, you can go and get a delicious 7-figure seed funding for your proof of concept that don't exist and for your really crap product market fit. I ain't gonna say any more about that. But you by doing everything, you get to learn what you can do effectively. But more, you start to learn, number one, what you enjoy. You've got to understand where you bring the value and what you enjoy. If you can find something that you enjoy doing, because you might be really good at something, but you might not enjoy it. You don't want to shoehorn yourself into doing that for the rest of your career. Like something that you enjoy, something that brings a lot of value that you can do more effectively than your team. Bring people around you who can do the other stuff better than you can. And gradually build that process, build that network. Get out there. You've got a stakeholder manage. People know about you. And I know people talk a lot about personal brand, but the opportunities you can get from being out there and being seen in your field as someone who is blazing a trail. Don't be quiet about it. Find your voice within that. For some people, they want to shout damn loud. For other people, they're just quietly putting out there just how good they are. But back it up. Don't just be all talk. Bring the action. For me, it's like, find that value, but make sure fundamentally that you enjoy what you do. There's value in what you do, because there's no point, doing something you enjoy, but no one ain't going to pay for. Because trust me, you ain't going to enjoy the other stuff then. But also find something that the world needs, something with purpose. Go make it happen. Always remember that with those 3 things, it becomes, even though it's not glamorous, you're gonna be ready for the journey, and that you never know where that train's gonna go when you start a business. That train might that train might crash. But then, you know, you get out of the wreckage and you're like, damn, let's go and find the next station, start the next journey. And sometimes you even need to take a job between the stations once you've crashed your train. It's not the end of the road, but use the lessons from crashing that train to make sure you don't crash the next one. Because if you crash too many trains, people won't let you drive it anymore.
Yeah.
Well, Lee, I think you pretty much just answered what my next question was going to be just there. Speaking of that journey, my question was, what gives you the motivation to keep going, especially during the hard times? And I think you kind of just answered that there and then. But I suppose, you know, one of the things I'd like to ask is, you know, you've done a lot, you've accomplished a lot. But what would be your proudest achievement to date?
Definitely getting back walking and walking my first steps with my daughter. It's the most proudest thing for me. It's a memory that'll be emblazoned on my mind forever. And you know, I've got some pretty cool awards, like a fellowship from National Academy of Sciences. You know, won national awards. But it's nice to get a bit of recognition. But it's the things that actually matter in life. When you actually overcome adversity and you're able to do something with someone who, you know, means an awful lot to you.
Yeah.
You know, those are the things you remember when you're throwing some kind of retirement party. I mean, for our generation, we aren't going to retire. We're just going to keep making impacts until the day we aren't here anymore. But at some point in the future, when I'm old and I'm grey, and you know, I'll look like Sir Trevor McDonald, I'll be like, there'll be things I'll remember, all these great things, but actually I remember the things that matter. And for me, it's always going to be, you know, turning that adversity and taking those steps with my daughter when she started walking. Like, I don't think there's going to be a prouder moment than that. But yeah, I mean, you never rise on your own. And especially within our community, you know, we do need to ascend together. And, you know, collaboration is important for the people in the north. If we're going to level up, we need to level up together. So it's like, you know, bring people on the journey with you. Never go it alone. And realize that your best moments will not be what you're recognized for or what you achieve. It'll be what you do with other people.
Absolutely. And you know what? If you could speak to your younger self, what advice would you give the younger Lee Chambers? If you had, what advice would you give?
Yeah, my advice would be to don't think you need to have it all figured out. So I remember being like 20 at uni, and I felt like I needed to know who I was and what I was going to do. And I was like, you know what? I'm leaving uni. I'm going to go into the world of work. I need to know like what I want to do, who I am. And when I looked for that, I couldn't find it. And that made me feel, well, put me in a bad place. But actually, the realization is, you know, I'll soon be 40. I'm still learning about myself. You know, no one ever has it all worked out. With the biggest experiment we'll ever have, the biggest experiment is you understanding who you are. And, you know, that's it. People say, oh, it's a journey. And it's a bit overused, isn't it? But at the same time, actually learning about yourself, you'll never have it all figured out. You're a constant experiment. And actually, one of the biggest things for me as a lesson was having that beginner's mindset. I never think I'm an expert. There's always something to learn. When you have a beginner's mindset, you never take the basics for granted. And that kind of allows you to then be able to realize that you don't need to have it figured out. You've just got to go and work to figure it out.
Just one more on that, Lee. I just wanted to. One of the things I noticed on the background was you had experience as a elite performance coach. Was it with Momentum Sports Performance? And we've been talking about like entrepreneurial mindset. Can you tell us a bit about that experience as a performance coach?
Yeah, so it's quite an interesting. When I talked about opportunities coming your way, that was one of those. So after losing my professional training budget at the National Bank and then getting made redundant, I was like, I'm going to pay to train myself in things. So I started a series of qualifications around nutrition, sports performance, human performance. And I ended up with an opportunity one day where someone who I was, you know, effectively like a course leader said, do you want to go and apply these principles in a football club? And that football club was a small local football club in League Two. Off I trotted. I was like, yeah, I can do this as a bit of a side project thing. Let's see how that goes. Drew up some performance frameworks for this team, and they're like, don't have the budget to execute this. But there's an academy of another club who would probably bite your hand off for this stuff. So off that took me to Everton and then to Man City, where I worked with academy and first development elite teams to actually bring together aspects of performance. So, these clubs spending millions and millions of pounds on enhancing sleep, on specific coaching and training, on the other aspects of endurance and performance, things such as precision hydration, chefs cooking, for nutrition, all those different aspects, but they didn't seem to be linking them all together. So my job was to see what was happening and see what the players were funding themselves and trying to knit that into a framework that could be replicated across an academy so that, players of the future would have a framework to be able to maximize their performance, but understand their individual aspects as well. So while I only did that for just under a year and decided, firstly, I'm running a business, I don't have time for this. And secondly, I kind of planted the seed. Other people can push on with this. And that was in the very early days of, City's academy, where they just built 82 rooms for, players ranging from 7 to 18. And yeah, just reflecting back now, I'm still in contact with a few people. It still seems like, some of the things that I implemented have a bit of a legacy and have been developed. And yeah, it just makes you think that could have been a whole other career if I decided to go in that direction. But it's a very cutthroat industry. Again, it's not very diverse behind the scenes. And yeah, I learned a lot about myself and my own values there and how they weren't being met. And what I would say is, for all the the joys of meeting really interesting people and being in that world, didn't really meet my values. So actually, in some ways, it wasn't the place for me, and that's okay to admit that. And I think everyone should think about that in their own world too.
Definitely. Now, Lee, we're going to go on to the bonus part of the episode, the fun, the funny part of the episode. I'm going to ask you 3 funny questions. And then, if you give me an answer to those questions. And this one, the first one I'm going to judge you on. Should pineapple be on pizza?
As far as I'm concerned, you can have whatever you want on your pizza, but I aren't eating pineapple on a pizza. Not for me. Not for me.
Thank God. Right. If you could have one superpower, what would you want to have?
Truth be told, the ability to fly. So I just want to be able to take off from wherever I am. Whether you also get the ability to land is another question. But I literally some days walk out my office and I just want to go. And also with the traffic as it is at times as well, and the trains being delayed, could really do with that superpower. But yeah, to just be able to take off, fly, and soar around.
And then the last question, which is, if you could have a dinner party, and if you could have a dinner party, you can only invite 3 guests. Could be dead or alive. Who would you invite?
Oh man, Jesus. No, not Jesus. It'd be interesting to invite Jesus, like. No, I'd have Lewis there. Get Lewis there. Invite him.
Is that Mr. Hamilton or
Mr. Hamilton? Yeah,
Mr.
because
Hamilton,
come on,
yeah.
Look, he's kind of experienced going out there completely pushing it back against an industry which is, incredibly lacking in diversity. But then realised that it's not just a case of role modelling, but changing the systems as well. I think similarly, I'd have Barack Obama there as well. Because again, I'm all for people who've blazed those trails. If you're a first, you know what? You've probably had to do an awful lot to get there. And, when he speaks, he sounds wise. He brings presence into a room. And I'm absolutely sure he'd drop some serious nuggets of knowledge if he was in that room as well. Probably the third one, and this is probably a bit different, but my granddad passed away 5 years ago. I'd have him back there at the table with me, Lewis, and Beric. And I just think that'd close the loop, because he was a wise man. And no one messed with my granddad. He could box, and he actually probably not the space to tell that story, but someone started hassling him in a queue in a bank, and he was in his 80s, and this guy's like pulling his bag and everything. He just give him a quick jab, put him on the floor.
Wow.
So like my granddad is a legend of a character, never to be messed with, but absolutely heart of gold and a proper human-centric person. So I'd like to close that loop with my granddad, Lewis Hamilton, Barack Obama.
Excellent. Well, Lee, thank you so much for being a guest on the See Me Be Me podcast. And where can people follow you if they, as part of your journey? Where can people go to?
So the best places are on my website, which is leechambers.org, and I'm active on LinkedIn. So find me on LinkedIn, Lee Chambers. I'll probably be the first one at the top of your pile. So connect, follow, and I'm always posting stuff about journeys. So you'll get to dig in, find out a bit more.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Thanks very much, Lee. Take care.
Thanks, Lee.
Bye-bye. Blair,
Niall,
what did you think about today's episode with Lee Chambers?
I found Lee's story very inspiring today. How he had the autoimmune arthritis, and how he was basically saying it doesn't matter how hard things were going to get, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. And it's also just how he's always had that entrepreneurial mindset about no matter what hurdles you go through, you just got to keep going and going. I just found that a really inspiring story.
Yeah, no, it was truly motivational. The fact that, even with that condition and, being immobile in the hospital bed, and there was 9 individuals that was going through a similar kind of thing, and only 3 of them had that mindset and that dogged determination to say, you know what, regardless of what happens, I'm going to get back walking and I'm going to help myself. And Lee was able to achieve that. And you know what, it was really for people listening to that episode to be able to think, you know what, when times are hard, you know what, don't put yourself down. Just think, right, how am I going to overachieve? How am I going to get past the problems that I'm facing? And how can I make it out to the other side? So that was truly, truly inspirational. And you know what? I think a lot of where Lee's mindsets comes from is from his upbringing. Being an entrepreneur at such an early age, selling sweets and drinks at school, and even going through his uncle buying him his first video game system, which was the Commodore 64, and how that led to him setting up his own video game e-commerce business, and selling and distributing games. But you know what? It's really great to see that Lee has had different stages of his journey. He went to university, studied business studies, went to be work in the corporate finance world, discovered it wasn't really for him, ended up setting up a business selling video games, and then, sold that business, exited, and now runs a health and well-being company and coaches people across the world, like renowned across the UK, and is a renowned public speaker. So it's a thing to say is that, wherever your journey is, it might not be the end point. Everybody is constantly evolving
as a person. And it's once again, just with Lee, he's just another case of the see me, be me effect, just watching the struggle that his parents went through and how that essentially made him the entrepreneur that he is today. Just no matter how hard things get in your life, you can always make something out of yourself. And as well, it's just saying that there's not a lot of Black people in the areas of tech or even in well-being where he's working now, and just being that trailblazer, essentially showing other young Black people out there that this is an industry that you can get involved in as well.
I think he was just spelling out how important diversity and especially inclusion is. If you can't see it, you can't be it. And I think it's very important to have, and it comes back to what we always talk about, role models. they're so important if we want more people to come into these industries like tech or engineering. So, you know, Lee's it's a real credit, and the stuff that he's doing at Essentialise is absolutely fantastic. And please do make sure to go and follow him on his journey on LinkedIn. And I think that's all we've got time for today. So if you have enjoyed this episode, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We're across all major social media platforms. You can listen to this audio on Spotify and Apple Music. You can follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook at The Blair Project. And we're on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Get Me Motoring. So for now, see you later and peace out. If you've liked today's episode, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. The Blair Project is on all major social media platforms, including Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube at The Blair Project. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Yes, we are on TikTok at Get Me Motoring. If you'd like to follow myself individually, I am on Instagram at Nile Henry and also LinkedIn at Nile Henry as well.
And if you want to follow myself, I'm on Instagram as Blair Henry _97 and also on LinkedIn as just Blair Henry.
So we look forward to having you on the next episode. So stay tuned. Take care.
Until next time.